Space Marines are the quintessential Warhammer 40k faction. We love them. They're so much fun to play. They've been very powerful in the last year especially, and 9th edition is going to see some really exciting changes to them. We've been having fun trying new builds that were not possible before. So we're going to talk about some changes, positives, negatives, as well as some lists that we've been playing around with that we think you're really going to enjoy. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the positive changes first.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about the things that actually hurt them from the core rules.
Yep.
And finally, some strats. So first of all, Space Marines have amazing troop choices. I'm actually hard-pressed to think of any that I don't like. Intercessors are very durable.
Yeah.
They hit hard. They're just great.
And the new Assault Intercessors in particular, I think are really fantastic.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge amount of great different ways to build out your Intercessors. Even this traditional attack Marines, especially in transports and then going even to scouts, all of these are good. All of the Phobos stuff, so many great troop choices. And this is relevant because they all have objective secured.
That's right.
They're all very either durable or they have a lot of interesting other tricks they can play. And in a mission set that's all about holding and holding until the start of your next turn, the Space Marines can do that really well.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the Tactical Marines because we actually think that they have a new role in 9th edition that they didn't previously have in 8th edition. They're not as durable as the Intercessors or as Killy, but they can take transports, they can have lots of bodies on the objective, so they're great. Not to mention Infiltrators that make the already difficult Deep Strike basically impossible against this army.
Yes, absolutely. So any army, when you're looking at armies that won and lost in 9th edition, look for people that have great durable troop choices that have or anything that OPSEC that's really durable and wants to take that midboard. The Space Marines fit. They're kind of the poster boys for that. So it's going to work really well.
Space Marines have lots of tricks in their arsenal. There's tons of stratagems. Psychic Awakening brought untold numbers of upgrades for their characters.
And they already had a ton, especially between their supplements and their main book.
Exactly. And so they are probably one of the factions that's most excited about the new CP. They had ways of getting double battalion before, but now they can be completely flexible, get up to 17 command points. You can build towards a specific thing. You don't have to take 6 scout squads or whatever. And that's something that's really exciting for them because they will make use of all of those command points.
There are some factions that gain CP and some that lost them. Space Marines is one of those factions that gain CP. And they gain them in interesting ways because not only are they getting more than the maximum they almost ever would get, because you would have to be triple battalion to get this amount, which you couldn't pull off with Space Marines effectively. But now it unlocks different ways to build your armies. If you wanted to go all into Terminators and Land Raiders, and you want to go all into fast attack choices, you can do these things and have way more CP than you've ever had. And as we know, their stratagems are fantastic. So it really levels up the army in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. And something that you'll see in the army, which is similar to other factions that have higher CP cost strats, you can use them more often. Transhuman, amazing stratagem. But you really had to think selectively about when you wanted to use it.
You can do it maybe once in a game, twice in a game.
Exactly. And so it was a really tough call. So we're going to see lots more of those as you play through 9th edition.
And Space Marines actually have ways to regenerate CP mostly across different factions. And so you can even imagine with more CP to spend and CP coming later in the game, they're in a good position to regen even a full 5 throughout the game. And so it's even higher. It's not just 17, right? They could have 22 CP in a game fairly reliably. That's a lot more than most Space Marine armies had.
Absolutely. So one thing that we sort of predict we're going to see in 9th edition is this transition to MSU, or mass multiple small units.
Yeah, that's right.
And Space Marines are actually really well suited to this. Obviously, we have troops, you can combat squad. These are great, but they're really good at having lots of smaller units. Dreadnoughts, things that are kind of at or below the mid price range. And that's really exciting.
Something below like 150 points is probably a good metric. And the Space Marine units, they do this while maintaining a threat. They're both durable and they can still be pretty scary at that point range. And you can get a lot of them on the board. And as you pointed out, it's not just taking troop choices, dreadnoughts, characters, all kinds of interesting things at around that point cost. And the Space Marines do a really good job of it, spreading out those threats.
Absolutely. They're definitely not about creating massive Death Stars. Everything is good, but nothing is completely crucial. And that's going to be really important in 9th edition.
So speaking of dreadnoughts, I think they actually saw a big improvement. Any vehicle that shoots and fights and then wants to move, really, and that's really a great description of a dreadnought, they saw a big improvement because now these dreadnoughts that wanted to shoot and fight, they often were finding it tough. They wanted to stand still to not get the move and shoot penalty, but then they have this great combat potential, but they're not getting into combat, and then once they start fighting, they're not shooting. Well, 9th edition has changed all that because now you can move, shoot, and then when you get tied in combat, you could shoot in combat.
So powerful, and combine that with the increased engagement distance.
Yeah.
Previously, if you were going up against Dreadnoughts, which of course are no joke, even the Redemptor can really punch a hole through most units. You could just go up a building, whatever, it's fine. But now they can also do that. It takes away a lot of their weaknesses in pretty much every single way. Yeah, it's really great.
So I'm super into them, and the Space Marines have one of the largest collections of vehicles that benefit from move and shoot and shoot in combat. They also have one of the largest collections of vehicles that want to shoot, like Dreadnoughts that want to fight and shoot.
Yeah.
And so they're seeing huge improvements across the board for that.
Yeah, before you ended up actually having to sort of avoid that. You would go all melee or even all shooty, which was more common. But now you actually are benefiting from these sort of dual role Dreadnoughts or other vehicles that Space Marines do so well.
We know how powerful, for instance, when the Iron Hands came out and allowed things like these flyers to move and shoot without penalty, because they natively hit on 2s.
That's right.
If they aren't suffering the move and shoot penalty. There's a lot of things in the army that are like that, that start to hit super well. And the army already goes from being extremely accurate to independent and extremely accurate. And that's really crucial because in this game you want to space out a little more. You don't want to clump up.
No.
And now you can spread out, still be really, really accurate, which is amazing.
Absolutely. And on a related note, the Space Marines have so many amazing vehicles, interesting vehicles, and now they can shoot in combat. This is particularly nice because they also have many vehicles that have lots of shots, right?
Yeah.
Vehicles can still get touched in combat, and if they have a few high-value shots, they can still kind of get bogged down by infantry. But there's lots of amazing vehicles that have several heavy bolters on them.
Yeah.
We really like the Land Raider Crusader for all the shots coming out of that thing.
Having a Land Raider covered with heavy bolters or covered with flamers that got tagged, that really sucks, but now it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Additionally, you think of Razorbacks with twin assault cannons. They're 24-inch range. You wanted to get them close.
Right.
Now they're moving up, not suffering that penalty, and then when you tag them, a twin assault cannon, it's no joke.
And they're also not that easy to kill, right?
That's right.
So unless someone is willing to run up and risk probably not killing this Razorback, they're going to take that return fire. The Razorback actually doesn't really care about moving somewhere else.
Yeah.
They're sitting on the objective, hopefully, and so they're happy to be exactly where they are. So those are kind of things we want to look for in highlighting things that have really benefited from this new rule.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we talked about, the missions are about holding.
Yep.
And the objectives are a lot of times midboard or diagonally midboard. And you want armies that could stand there but still be threatening.
Right.
And what you want is midboard shooting armies. Right. And the Space Marines are kind of the quintessential midboard shooting army.
Oh, yeah.
They do have long range, but they are best at that rapid fire range. And so I think that suits them really well, that they'll get up to that midboard with their troops, with their vehicles, and they'll be in prime position to really slam the rest of the board.
Absolutely. Most of the Space Marine builds, and actually most of the Space Marine factions, would have trouble in the previous edition where they had to just get completely into the enemy's lines. Luckily, you don't really need to do that anymore. You can take the midboard, shoot the entire range of it now, basically, and they can be completely content. No more kind of rushing forwards, doing these crazy, first turn gambits, and that is great for them.
And the Space Marines ultimately are, although they have really strong combat potential, most of their output comes from shooting.
They're a shooting army, yeah.
And so one of the great things is often you have these huge single units like Leviathan Dreadnoughts here, or even Repulsors, that are single models that have a ton of output, and people will use the terrain to hide from them.
Yes.
Well, the new terrain rules allows you to take one of those models, bring it up to the center of the board, and maybe touch it into a piece of terrain, so now it can shoot through it, and it becomes a lot harder to hide from some of these big models.
Absolutely. And conversely, it makes them also much less susceptible to getting killed before they can do their thing, right?
That's right.
You could take even like a Predator becomes exciting because you can have it behind the ruin, completely out of line of sight. They just tow in there. They can see whatever's in front of that. And that's really exciting to at least make sure you get that value. They also kind of start benefiting more from cover, right? Because they can be shot, but a lot of units like infantry would probably rather just be completely hidden. The vehicle says, okay, I'm just going to get in the cover, I'll get the bonus, and I'll take the return fire, but I'll still have the benefit I probably didn't have before.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, so it's not all benefits. Like any army in 9th edition, they've all changed.
That's right. So Space Marines are in a lot of respects about the characters. They have some of the best characters in the game. And even the ones that aren't just melee monsters or shooting monsters, we have a lot of support characters. They often wanted to operate independently.
Yeah, now with the new character targeting rule, you have to stay within 3 inches of 3 or more models, unless it's a vehicle or monster. And that's actually a real problem because you had things like Smash Captains, Psychers, you had things like Phobos Captains and Lieutenants that all wanted to be independent.
Yeah.
And now that gets a lot riskier because people will shoot these things down.
Absolutely. You could kind of string them out to within 6 of something, really push that out.
Push the auras, right?
Push the auras, have them stay on an objective a lot of the time, just kind of, might leave them behind. Tech Marines are good for this if you're not using them to heal a vehicle at the moment.
That's right.
And you can't do that anymore. So you have to be a lot more careful than you did before. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely going to change the way that you play those characters.
I think it changed in practice. I think we're going to see that this rule changes a lot about the game.
Yeah.
And Space Marine characters in particular, if you get a high value gun, you'll take them out. And normally they're leveling up the army so much that losing them can be kind of very painful.
So that's actually a really good point because you could have something like 10 intercessors around it. But if I see that with a lot of my shooting armies, I say, okay, that's a manageable target. And that's worth trying to knock out your chapter master or whatever it is, as long as I can get through that. So learning that the amount of firepower that it takes to clear those screens becomes very, very valuable.
I agree, absolutely. So in addition to that, the Space Marines, as we know, when they got their doctrines, the doctrines are a hugely powerful addition. Now they changed them so that you have to auto-advance to them. Now, in particular, the heavy doctrine used to be the strongest. Now, we found that it's already considerably weakened just because you only get it for the first turn. But now, the first turn of 9th edition, you don't score. So you don't score, obviously there's no kill points, and you're not scoring any objectives.
That's right.
And so a lot of armies can afford to hide for that first turn and be non-interactive. That essentially wastes that heavy doctrine, further penalizing armies that were leaning into it.
It's absolutely devastating for them. Imperial Fists want to kill tanks in the first turn if they can. You can just hide them, and we think you will be bringing a lot of those tanks. Iron Hands actually want to be moving around and shooting with their heavy weapons. Again, just hide from them. So that really takes this heavy doctrine that already got hit and punishes it even further. So that's a negative that's really for the Devastator Doctrine armies, obviously. I think Assault Doctrine should be very excited about this edition.
Assault Doctrine got even better in some ways in the sense that, you can now hold off and get a little closer. And you can keep more things in reserve for that Assault Doctrine. So we don't have them on the table here, the White Scars, but we think they're definitely a big winner.
Absolutely.
So a big loss as well is the loss of Overwatch. There's some armies that Overwatch really well. The Space Marines is one of them. Not only because they have a lot of units like aggressors that have huge amounts of DACA, but they have many factions, the fists, the hands that can Overwatch on 5s or better. Not to mention a ton of rerolls, which made their Overwatch fantastic. Losing Overwatch to this army, this is probably one of the armies hit the most by the loss of Overwatch.
It's a very big deal because, as we said, they are a midboard army. They want to kind of move up, take the point, and dare your opponent to move up and take it, right? And this also takes one of their other benefits, which is the sort of MSU style, and makes it a negative, right? Because Overwatch can still happen, but generally you want it to be on one unit, right? So maybe if you can play a 6-man aggressor squad up and force them to have to charge it, that could work. But generally speaking, you have several smaller squads of Space Marines. Not really worth to Overwatch with one. So it actually kind of takes some of these positives and makes them a problem for the army.
Yeah, so that loss to Overwatch, it's pretty punishing. But there's really other things, and I think one of the things that we've seen is with the change to doctrines, we've seen people mixing factions a little more.
Absolutely.
Maybe bringing a bit of these Ultramarines with some White Scars. And what we're finding now is that going into 9th edition, that's going to start costing CP.
Yeah, it's funny because it was such a rapid change, right? We had the changes to the doctrines, then people started building these other lists, which are very interesting. And now suddenly I don't think it's going to be as worth it. Maybe you'll bring some fists that can ignore cover, but I think largely these kinds of lists are going to start going away. You want to keep those CP. And what this is going to mean is it's not all a bad thing. It's kind of just a different thing, right? You stick with your chapter. You build towards their strengths.
I like that personally. I like the mono. I like mono theme. And I like the fact that people are going to have to pay for it. It is a drawback to list construction, but I'm into it.
I think it's healthy for the game. And this kind of goes with a lot of the factions that do get hit. It's a bummer now. We're going to work through it, and it'll be better for the game overall.
Well, one of the things about detachments as well is the fact that if you're taking fewer detachments, you're getting fewer HQs. And as we know, the Space Marine HQ choices are fantastic.
Like they're heroes.
A lot of times you'd build armies around them. And in order to unlock a lot more heroes, you're going to have to probably pay CP for more detachments.
That's right. They're not very well suited to Brigade. Maybe you could find a Salamander one that takes advantage of that. But overall, it's going to be harder to get those HQs. So you're going to have to be a bit more sparing with them.
Yeah, I think at most, you're probably going to have to pay 2 CP to get an extra patrol for an extra 2. Because as we've talked about before, if you take a battalion and a Supreme Command, that's already 4 HQs, which is close to the right amount for Space Marines. But I think 2 more gets you right into that territory that some armies are going to want.
Absolutely. You're basically losing redundancy. And so if you want to get that back, get an extra captain, or you want to have that smash captain, which is more likely to die now, then you can get that back for 2 CP.
Well, one of the things that the Space Marines were probably the best at was indirect shooting.
That's
They're
right.
still the best at indirect shooting.
Yeah.
And indirect shooting used to matter a lot because it got you those kills first turn.
Right.
It picked up kills when people were trying to hide, and it allowed you to, especially when people got into buildings and were untargetable, it allowed you to pick them off. All those things have gone away. You don't need to kill first turn. You could shoot into buildings already. And really, you don't need to kill at all. So trying to pick up that last scout that's hiding over there, that's just not a part of the mission anymore.
That's right.
So paying the extra tax for this more expensive form of shooting, probably not worth it.
Yeah, it doesn't really do much for you. In our playtesting so far, we felt that we've had often several units you could shoot at. You would shoot at one, they would sort of pluck, pluck, pluck until they are out of line of sight. Yeah. You'd move on, come back to it in a later turn, and you can do that now. Whereas before, that was such a high value thing that you could do.
Yeah.
And it's just not as valuable. So indirect didn't really get any worse, but it's less valuable in the game overall.
Yeah, we might find that there are other uses for it that come later. Like maybe there's character targeting.
Sure.
Like, hey, you have a character way back in a corner and there's no one near 3, but you can't get line of sight.
That's
and then
actually
an indirect would pick them up. So we're gonna see how it evolves. And you could still build a Space Marine army that tried to alpha so hard. Yeah. We've seen those at LVO this year that were really tough, but ultimately they're one-trick ponies, and I don't think they play the game very well.
Absolutely.
So why don't we take a look at a few of the strategies that you're going to use, and then we'll take a look at some lists right after.
Sounds good.
One of the common new scenarios that is going to come up a lot is the way that you can use terrain to keep your units safe, but then give them line of sight when they need it.
Absolutely, and this becomes very important with vehicles as we play in this new edition. So for example, what we have here is some trusty servants of the Emperors right here in the middle.
Yeah, we got 3 Contemptor Dreadnoughts with las cannons and auto cannons. For the Salamanders, a really tough opponent here.
That's right. A couple support characters hiding behind using the new character rule to actually block with the vehicles.
That's right.
And we have some Tau, of course, that they want to shoot. Now currently, they're not on this piece of terrain, which means even though that there's windows here, neither side can see the other one because nobody's in the terrain.
More than 5 inches tall, so the Tau can't shoot at the Dreadnoughts, and they're close to the terrain to stop the angles, but they're still far enough back that they're not within it. Now, similarly, our Dreadnoughts can't see these tanks.
Exactly, and this becomes doubly more important when you're doing deployment because it's actually much harder for them to kind of move around them, so you can absolutely set up in this, but you can also get up into the midboard. But now when it's our turn to actually go ahead and shoot, we've survived SMS or whatever they have, you know.
Yeah, well, it's just going to plink off those Dreadnoughts.
Exactly, we're totally good. So they're just going to step up into and onto the terrain. So we're just going to move
What you'll notice here is this piece of terrain actually doesn't have a base maybe right on the bottom. You have to agree with your opponent where the actual footprint of the terrain is. That's super important in 9th edition because there's a lot of rules about being partially within, wholly within, etc. In this case, we're counting kind of the shadow of the 2nd floor, but in this case, to be safe, we're just touching the wall.
Exactly, and that is, it's written in the rulebook, but you really want to make sure, especially as different people have different terrains or different homebrew things, just double check, confirm everything. We're all playing on different terrain here. So they've tapped in, they can now see through this window, it's unlocked, and this guy's sort of leaning over into this window here. Now they can shoot the Tau. They can unleash hell.
Exactly. Now we've got these 3 Dreadnoughts. They just moved. They would have suffered the move and shoot penalty. They're not going to. They already hit on 2s. We've got a captain there for rerolls. With all those las cannons, we could drop 2 of these tanks, and that would swing this battle immeasurably. In this game, it came down to who got to shoot first. And because we were able to use this terrain to hide, that really worked for our advantage. Now, this terrain could have been all the way back in our deployment zone. And we could just be back there. We could be waiting until the tanks have to come out, the opponent's tanks, to take care of some other threat. Then we touch our terrain and unlock our ability to see.
Absolutely, and this also helps negate one of the downsides to some of these vehicles. I mean, these guys move 8, which isn't terrible, but previously they would have had to move all the way around the terrain, make these more extreme moves to one side of the board, but now you can actually play the sort of center, be more flexible. It's a really big change for them.
It
vehicles without fly,
it changes the mobility a lot, right? Yeah, as you're saying, because if you walk to that side, the rest of my tower army could come to this side, and now all of a sudden we're running around this building, and the faster army wins. In this case, the Tau is faster. But now that you've touched this building, you've got line of sight 360 around, and there's nowhere to hide.
Absolutely.
So this is a great example. Let's show you an example of then what happens if someone finally does get up close and touch your vehicles.
Sounds good.
Even though your vehicles can shoot in combat, they are still susceptible to being tagged. So there's actually some interesting new tactics that you could think about to keep you kind of shooting at the targets you want to be shooting at.
Absolutely. So what you can do is you can really take advantage of a couple things. One is the new charging rules. You have to reach every target that you declare against. And you can combine this with the tanks that actually do, like, they don't mind getting tagged in combat, right?
Some tanks are going to shoot better in combat than others. For example, here we have a standard Land Raider with 2 twin las cannons. and it has some heavy bolters.
Yep.
That's not going to be really good at shooting at a horde in combat. Maybe we'll kill 4 or 5 models, but we're not going to kill a big 10-man squad. Instead, here we have a Sakaran Punisher who has about 23 heavy bolter shots. He's going to do a very fine job. And so if you charged him with your boys, we'd be in a different place.
Exactly. The thing is, if I charge into here, odds are you're just going to get to gun down all the boys with your mass shots.
Yeah.
And then you can probably honestly use like your las cannons or side sponsons if
right.
you have that, because you have enough firepower to do that. So I really, really don't want to charge that. But what you can do here is essentially make sure that this tank that doesn't mind getting tagged is in front of your other tanks.
You're screening one tank with the other tank, but the one in front is the one that doesn't mind getting charged.
Exactly. So what we have here is I've got some shooter boys up here. They're going to try to start tagging things. Really, if I tag this Land Raider, it's as good as tagged in the old edition.
Yeah.
Right? They'll kill some boys, but it won't get to use its las cannons the way that it wants to.
We can imagine downfield we've got some guns or some planes or some anything else that the las cannons want to get at. The boys are tactically here trying to shut down these las cannons.
Absolutely. So what we've done here, it's not much of a difference, right? They're very close together. But because of this angle, I have a 5-inch charge to the Sakaran and over a 10-inch charge to the Land Raider. Now, I don't know math that well, but I will not take a 10-inch charge over a 5-inch charge. So I would have to, 1, declare both targets, just so I can reach the Land Raider.
Declare just the Sakaran.
Or just the Sakaran. Yeah, no need to take both. You might even Overwatch at that point. It's effective enough.
But it wouldn't be worth the CP, I think, to Overwatch. Because unless I can clear the whole squad, I still am going to have to do this trick next
Exactly.
time.
And so I'm kind of stuck in this position of having to declare this charge. Let's say I make it. I do my pile-ins. I tag the Land Raider.
That's right.
Not going to do much damage, but for me, I'm happy. I've done the tagging, right? And then what happens next?
So he's locked both these tanks in combat. Let's assume they do nothing in the combat phase. Now, my next turn, I'm not going to fall back with these.
Right.
Instead, what we're going to do is start shooting. Now, you can actually declare targets outside of combat.
That's
so let's say we had at the back a plane I wanted to take down, a Burnabama, something like that.
Sure.
I've got 2 las cannons here. So I could declare those las cannons against the Burnabama, and I could declare the Punisher and the heavy bolters at the boys here.
Yep.
Now, if I don't manage to clear all the boys, then these 2 las cannon shots are wasted.
That's right.
But it's probably a worthwhile risk anyways. Now, with these 20 shots, do I kill these boys? Well, normally I'd be at -1 to hit. So I'd be hitting here on 4s. Well, we've got a Master of the Forge here, which is an upgraded Tech Marine. He gives +1 to hit. Okay. That actually takes my tank back to hitting on a 3-up. And then we've got a Captain nearby giving me the rerolls of 1.
That's great.
Now, realistically, I could even, with some chapters, if I was, for instance, an Iron Hands or even Imperial Fists, give an additional +1 here.
Right.
So the net benefit is only a +1, but I actually had to give +2 to get there.
So good.
And so I'm still hitting on 2s. That's definitely going to allow this Punisher to clear these 10 boys.
Yep.
And then I get my 2 las cannons at the. I get my 2 las cannons all the way downfield. But now those las cannons are hitting on 2s.
That's right.
I'm not engaged anymore.
Yeah.
And now the Land Raider is completely free to shoot.
Absolutely.
In the event that 1 or 2 survived, and we're tagging both vehicles, I would just do the same thing again with the Land Raider.
Exactly.
I would use the heavy bolter. I would use the storm bolter. I would target these 2, and then I would use the las cannons to go downfield.
Really powerful stuff. And so you can see by just positioning in these ways and also stacking the pluses to hit, even though it might seem like they're not as useful as they used to be because you max out, you can still use them to negate these negatives against your army. So screening with tanks that actually want to get hit and don't mind, you can speculatively shoot. Yeah. Obviously here you're going to want to be careful. You're going to have to learn kind of the math of it. But generally speaking, it's a very powerful tool. And these tanks that have some high value shots, but also have tons of horde clearing, will be very comfortable in the new edition.
If you're building all tank armies, you're going to want a 50-50 between these tanks that do really well. And some of these tanks even have blast weapons and they can't fire.
Yes.
And so you're protecting the blast weapon tanks with the others. Think of you could do the same thing with Guard. You've got the Punisher protecting the battle cannon.
That's right.
The same sort of thing applies.
Punishers. I'm really excited about Punishers.
Absolutely.
I have to say that. Cool. Well, thank you guys. This has been a couple tactics. As we said, it's a very, very deep book. So there's a lot that we want to actually learn about moving forwards.
Why don't we take a look at some of the lists?
Cool. So let's take a look at a couple Space Marine builds that we've been having a lot of fun with and we think will be good in the new edition.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot you could do. Of course, this is a huge book, tons of supplements. It's not really one army. It's more like 5. But there's a few things that work really well. And one of the new things that we're really excited about is basing an army around the Assault Intercessor.
We think these things are amazing. This is an army that we've actually had a lot of fun with, and it's been very flexible. So the core of this list is basically 40 to 60 assault intercessors.
Yeah, and better on the upper side there.
Better on the upper side.
Yeah.
It's more like 60. Of course, you can combat squad them. They're very flexible. We like this as a White Scars army.
Right.
These things are bananas. You can afford to keep them off until turn 3 often.
Yeah, you can outflank them, and it's a better outflank because you're using the White Scars strat rather than the new outflank ability.
Better, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Then they can come on with, what, 4 attacks, -2, 2 damage each. Just absolutely devastating. And of course, this is on an army that overall is actually a board control army, right?
Absolutely. And so one of the downsides to this army would be that it can't get kills early game, that it wants to wait mid game, that it needs the opponent to kind of come to it a little bit sometimes. But that's exactly what this edition is all about. You don't need to kill early game. You can wait, and you can wait for your perfect time to strike. And if you're holding that center of the board with 60 assault intercessors, people can't just come in there and try to fight those objectives off you.
Absolutely.
And they can't shoot you off either because that's a ton of wounds, especially if you take some of these support characters like the Apothecary.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely been playing it with Apothecary. We take the new Judiciary, which makes receiving charges even easier for the White Scars.
Yeah, that's right. This new character allows you to fight first, even if you're charged. Which, when you've got a block of 10 assault intercessors and you're fighting first, it's a big boon.
They really have to throw multiple units to even have a chance to be fighting before you do stuff. Librarian is great. We take all that kind of stuff. We do take Con Bike, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
We've also been running it with 3x3 of the new bikes, which are already good, but with White Scars, ridiculously effective. 8
attacks on the charge, basically. It's crazy, and they're super fast. They advance in charge.
Yeah.
So those new bikes are fantastic. We take all 9 of them, and they're fantastic. One thing we didn't mention is, of course, all of our Assault Intercessor squad, we almost always give a Thunder Hammer to them because you still need to be dealing with tanks and those heavy threats. And so that's always worthwhile.
Yeah, that was definitely something that we added as we realized it didn't quite have enough tank killing.
Yeah.
But once you add the Thunder Hammers in, then you have the tools for tank killing within the range of the board that you actually care about. If they're hanging back doing stuff, that's fine. You can lose intercessors. We played this against some of the shootiest armies, and you can just keep throwing bodies on the board. Yeah. And it's still useful, right? So we really like this list. It's a lot of fun, and we think it's actually very powerful.
This is probably the one we've test played the most.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty strong, and we put it up against some of the heaviest hitting shooting armies.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of bodies to get through.
It's so
and it gives you a ton of play, so we really like that. Another one that's kind of obvious is the idea that you could tech into a lot of vehicles.
Yeah.
Of course, you already had the Master of the Forge, which was an upgraded Tech Marine. He gave an aura of +1 to hit to all vehicles, and he could heal better and things like that.
Right.
So now that vehicles don't suffer move and shoot penalty, and they get +1 to hit, you could have a huge table full of vehicles, or really a bubble full of vehicles, that are moving and still hitting on 2s.
Absolutely. It's just taking advantage of all the things that we've already discussed, right? So you can take Predators, you can take Sicarans, which are nice because they also have tons of shots, and so are okay if you get tagged, right? But having said that, we like 2 chapters for this list. We like 1, obviously Iron Hands for all of the extra healing and spells.
The Feel No Pain, the operating on top profile.
Exactly. This is really, really powerful. And the other thing that we also like is Ultramarines, right?
Yeah.
They allow you to fall back and shoot at -1. Yes, you can shoot in combat, but this gives you flexibility that basically no other army in the game will have anymore.
That's right. It's a very big change. And so other things you can look at is start looking at things like the Razorbacks with the heavy bolters, or even with the assault cannons, the twin assault cannons, because their disadvantage is that they couldn't move and shoot. And their other disadvantage is the 24-inch range, they could easily be tagged. Well, now none of that's happening. And so when you have all these vehicles and they're so efficient, and even if you have a few TAC Marines in some of these Razorbacks, like you could even have 5, 6 Razorbacks with TAC squads. And, those are the things right up in the front. And you've got those troops jumping out with the OBSEC playing little tricks. You can do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and it's mobile enough. I mean, vehicles often do have movement, right? The slower tanks still move 10 inches. They just didn't want to take it because of the minuses to hit. But now you can be pushing up the board and sort of tapping into ruins, shooting through them if they have windows, and being very flexible in a way that you couldn't be before.
Yeah, so we definitely think these vehicle lists are going to be common. Spice in a few Dreadnoughts, spice in a few Flyers. There's lots of options in there that are going to be really, really cool. But of course, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Right, we think there is a lot of other lists you can build. For instance, the Salamanders. Now that they have all this extra CP, they have the best strats of almost any.
They were always starved for that,
right? And so now they have that CP. They can unlock a ton of different stuff. I think they'll play best as a mixed force. We've got the Imperial Fists here, who do a really good job with bolters, and you could just you could do a similar job to the White Scars.
Honestly, yeah, you can. I mean, so Intercessors are great. You can kind of apply this to any chapter, just adjust accordingly, right? And I have played tons of Intercessors with sort of a mixed list, some heavy weapons in the back.
Yeah.
And I still feel like that's the way to go with Fist, and just kind of play into the bolter strats, things like that.
Yeah.
That you didn't want to before.
Raven Guard's still going to be able to put that heat on first turn.
Yeah.
And really push you back into your deployment zone and then own the board.
Yeah.
And they're going to own the board mostly through intimidating you early game. And that's going to be a great play style too. So pretty much every one of these chapters gets reinvigorated, entirely new ways to play it.
That's right.
And a lot of excuses to paint up a bunch of new tanks or a bunch of assault intercessors. Get buying that Indominus box set.
That's right.
And get those assault intercessors.
So as always, Space Marines are a massive codex, tons of builds, tons of strats, things to play with different chapters. So these are just some of the thoughts that we've had with them as we've been trying things out. Of course, we're always curious to hear what you guys are thinking. We, of course, will be showing the Space Marines very, very soon.
Yeah, we're going to play a couple games with them, at least one this week and then one in a couple weeks, showing off some of the strategies that we've been talking about.
Yeah, so definitely stay tuned. Make sure you like and subscribe to get all the updates as we release this massive amount of content over the release of 9th edition.
Great. We'll see you there.